This is the second part of our joint public hearing on the town and school budget for fiscal year 2012-13, and we've completed the town budget and articles, and we're going to follow a similar format for the school. Dr. Hayes will summarize the school, and then I'll summarize the changes the budget committee made, and then we'll go on to the warrant articles after receiving your comments and feedback. Dr. Hayes.
Sounds good now? Okay, dealing with the operating budget, if you picked up the handouts, excuse me, on the way in, I'm going to be referring to the yellow handout because everything on there describes our operating budget and circumstances related. On the front page, on the right-hand side, is the wording of the warrant article itself. It shows that there would be a total budget of $15,209,132, and that the default budget would be $15,468,030. And as was mentioned, we try to give you an estimated tax, so we've calculated that, and I remind you it's an estimate, but we did pretty well last year in being on target. The requested budget alone would create a decrease of $1.70 per thousand of assessed value, and the default budget would decrease by $1.35 per thousand of assessed value. I'm going to stay on that right-hand side for a moment to give you the nuts and bolts. Our operation, if you will, is really a combination of three funds, three budgets. The general fund is what typically the budget committee has dealt with, what the board has dealt with for some time, and it's the bulk, as you can see, the bulk of our expenses. We, in the request here, it's $14,434,132. That represents the figure arrived at by the budget committee, which is less than what the school board had proposed. The default amount of $14,693,030. But our operation really is comprised of some other functions, one of which is our food service program. Our food service program is basically a standalone operation that brings its revenue in through various reimbursement programs as well as sales of all of the meals that we do. And so we expect that to be a self-sufficient operation. Honestly, we weren't that last year, and the district had to cover some of that, but we're tracking it very well right now, and we're clearly a program that's in the black, and so we're very confident we're going to stay that way through the end of the year. The third group of expense is covered by our federal funds. We get entitlement grants for a variety of things in the area of special education and Title I primarily, and those are funds that are used to pay for staff and benefits and so forth for the programs that we provide for students. So this gives you a complete picture of the total expense that it takes to provide education here in Newmarket, and that's where you then get the total numbers that appear in the warrant article for both the requested and the default. As you move to the next chart, it's the revenues chart. So you get a picture of how much revenue we have identified. We have revenue in the general fund operating budget, and it shows you that at $286,815. The food service, again, remember that's a self-sufficient program, so you see an offsetting revenue to the expense that's shown up above. And in federal funds, the same thing. We have to be self-sufficient in those programs, or we end up cutting program and or staff. The last thing that's shown there is a revenue. We're projecting a fund balance at the end of the year of at least $297,439. That comes from basically three warrant articles that were voted upon last year that were all special warrant articles. One was for a roof replacement at the junior senior high school, and the other two were at the elementary school for a sprinkler system and a fire alarm system. And as a special warrant article, any leftover funds after the work is done are then returned to offset the appropriation in the following year. And so we did very well in terms of getting the work accomplished for less, and so we already project that $297,000 roughly is going to be returned, if you will, to offset next year's appropriation, and so that shows it as a revenue. So you get total revenues of $1.36 million roughly. The next two lines are state aid, both the adequacy aid grant and the state school tax. And so then you take the total budget and you subtract out all those revenues that I've already mentioned, and you get the total that has to be raised by local taxes. And for the requested budget, it's $9,763,635, and it's higher for the default, $10,022,533. So from that, we can calculate what's the tax. We know what the burden is, what's the tax. And so you see local taxes there for the requested at $13.10, and for the default, $13.45. The school tax is $2.44 on both scenarios. So you get a total school tax of $15.54 for the requested budget, and a little bit higher, $15.89 for the default budget. The current school tax, we all know, is $17.24. So just on this article alone, it shows a decrease in the tax rate if you accept the requested budget by $1.70 and per thousand, and the default budget by $1.35 per thousand. I'm going to move down to the bottom of the page just to briefly mention that we do have only one other warrant article that has a financial impact, and so down below it shows a total financial impact of all warrant articles. And it's the fire and life safety at the junior senior high school, which to us, we calculated $1.03 per thousand increase. So the net for both of those still shows a decrease, even if you voted for that other warrant article. A couple other things to mention on this page. I'm looking at the third paragraph on the left-hand side. The school board approved a budget of $14,626,324, which was a 1.15% increase over last year's operating budget. And as Brian will explain soon, the budget committee looked at that, gave it consideration, and reduced that amount by $192,192. And it just happened the other evening, and the board certainly hasn't had time, although the budget committee will make recommendations as to where that money should cut. The board has the final say on how to expend that amount of money. But I can tell you that the board is certainly committed to working with the budget committee and its amount, working with town council. We know that the real important thing in the future is the junior senior high school and how to deal with that. So whatever we have to do to achieve that objective, we certainly will work hard to do that and still provide quality education for our kids. The last comment was really already mentioned a little bit. We failed to reach an agreement with our Teachers Association. The best way to answer the question that was asked earlier is to call it status quo. For every employee, their compensation level stays exactly where it is, whether it's salary or it's other benefits, be it longevity and whatnot. It all stays exactly where it is, and with only one exception, and we call it column moves. If you move to a master's degree or a master's plus 30 graduate credits, then you move to a different place in the salary schedule, and the law allows that and permits that, and we certainly do that. On the flip side of this paper is first the chart is a summary of our budget as to compared to current year revised. It is pretty evident there that the benefits went up basically by a little increase in health insurance, 4.77%, and so that's what's reflected very much in the benefits line. Our biggest challenge as a school district, and the board has recognized it through this budget, is technology, and that's why you see the large increase in the equipment line. But to summarize just a few of these points, salaries for non-union personnel are in here, and they are set according to a new pay scale, which frankly corrects, isn't meant just to give raises. It really corrects a lot of inequities that we have amongst our staff, and I explain those at great detail with the Budget Committee. Getting down to elementary school, we're revising the ESOL program, which is for our students who don't speak English as a first language, and so it's a change in staffing there, but really an offsetting expense. There's a speech therapist that's going to be transferred from the elementary to the high school, and in the end, I'll explain later that it saves us some money. We're eliminating a certified occupational therapy assistant position. And one of the things to be noted here that we had to absorb in this budget, this current year, we were able to use some federal stimulus money. It's called the Ed Jobs Grant, and it was about $85,000, and it allowed us to offset certain expenses, and we chose to offset some health insurance for some employees. But now, as we know, that stimulus grant has gone. At the junior senior high school, again, a speech therapist is moving over, and as a result, we saved $60,000, $59,585, in contracted out services. It's much more expensive to contract that service out, so we find a way to save some expense there. This proposal would also include a revised pay scale for our coaches. It's outdated, hasn't been updated in 16 years at least. That's as far back as we can track it, and we're trying to get some more competitive and more consistent rates. There's money included in here for upgrading the facility here in the school with painting and with carpeting, and it might seem something that we maybe shouldn't expend it on. However, when we go to apply to the Department of Education to hopefully get reimbursement for a project, one of the things that we have to do is demonstrate that we've consistently worked to maintain the building that we have. They're not interested in places that make no effort to maintain their building and then expect the state to come in and save it. So to me, that's part of giving that evidence. Down under SAU, the board has granted a sabbatical to one of our psychologists, and that has a net payout of $25,105, but the return on investment is huge. That person comes back to us, and through now being certified in a very specialized area, we see a reduction of an annual reduction of $32,000 a year, because we're now not contracting out, we have someone on staff. Let's see. There's a amount in here for contingency of $30,000, and the way that that's been explained to the board is that we have really worked hard to create a lean budget here, and there's not a lot of flexibility for unanticipated circumstances, which can easily happen in a school year. So we created a specific account, it's very transparent, to say we need some buffer to deal with unexpected issues. Lastly, for SAU, there are funds in here. There's inequities as well in administrative contracts, and we're seeking some money, $30,431, to help correct some of those and to provide some performance awards. Technology has its own separate square here, and I don't have to go through it. You can read it, but it's two-pronged. It's to give us more accessibility to computers for our teachers and students. We really don't have enough accessibility to state-of-the-art kinds of equipment. We have 10-year-old computers and not enough accessibility. So this would give us laptop cards at both schools so that we can increase the use of computers as an instructional tool. The second piece is to improve our infrastructure, and I won't go through in great detail, except it is very frustrating to work on our computer system here, and we need to upgrade our infrastructure in order to do that. So that summarizes the board's proposal, and again, the Budget Committee took that and made some changes.
The Budget Committee made changes that totaled $192,192 less of a budget, so we cut up that much money. The elementary school, we did not make any direct changes to the elementary school budget. On the high school, we eliminated driver's education funding, and essentially this was determined after questions from the Budget Committee and discussions with the administration that funding was basically in and out funds from the state that weren't really paying for any expenses, but they were being channeled through the town to pay for state obligations, so it wasn't a budget item for us. So it has no impact if your student is taking driver's ed. We cut from the high school $18,000 from building repairs special fund. That would have been used to redo the painting and carpets. The committee is recommending that the school board, if they decide that they still want to proceed with that work, utilize the existing funds in the school repairs and maintenance fund. That's the school doesn't have capital reserve funds per se like the town does, but they do have some specific funds set aside, and one of them is the building school repairs and maintenance fund, which has $107,000 in it. So that's available for emergency repairs and regular maintenance at the discretion of the school board. On the SAU budget, there were multiple changes. We eliminated the $30,000 for the contingency fund. The majority of the committee felt that the town could not afford to budget for contingencies at this point, and that the most pressing contingencies that may be possible, such as special education costs, you might have a student with additional needs move into the district in the middle of the budget year, and underneath federal law, you have to provide that care. We have a fund for that purpose. Emergency repairs, we have a fund for that purpose, or technological failures, we have a fund for that purpose. So we felt those could be addressed through existing reserve funds. We reduced the technology equipment request by $25,000. And the majority of the committee felt that, again, we could use the school technology fund if the school board wanted to implement some of these additional technological purchases and infrastructure improvements. And that fund has a balance of $61,904 at this point, so there's sufficient funds to do that and deal with some emergencies. Possibly not all of them that might occur, but Budget Committee unanimously, just so it's clear, unanimously felt that having the $30,431 for the performance awards and inequity adjustments for the non-union staff was not appropriate this year, given that there is no teacher's contract or other changes on the town side for wages. This is our recommendation. Again, the school board could decide to proceed with adjustments to salaries and shift funds of other sources. And then we eliminated the database manager position, which had a total cost of $40,922. The committee did not feel this position was warranted. And then finally, two more changes, I think. We reduced the funds available for health insurance for non-union, non-individual contract employees, which are known as classified employees that are subject to the pay schedule that Dr. Hayes indicated was being adjusted. It's a little confusing, but there's three kind of groups of employees. There's the people that are in the union, so they're all teachers mostly. And as we all know, there's no changes this year because there's no contract. There are individuals like the superintendent who have specific contracts, one-on-one contracts with the school board. And then there are folks like secretaries, janitors, and other folks that are on this classified schedule. The school board has adopted a revised schedule that changes the salaries to make them more equitable, and the committee felt that those changes needed to be done. But the committee also feels that employees should be paying a higher portion of the monthly premium for health insurance, and this figure of a reduction of $28,125 is equivalent to the estimated cost of an employee paying 20% instead of paying 10%, and it would affect those employees that are on that classified schedule. The goal of the committee making that change was to kind of send a clear message that we need to start that practice sooner than later, and it'll be up to the school board as whether or not that can happen this year. just so you know, on the town side, they changed to that schedule of 80% by the town and 20% by the employee. I believe there's only a few individuals within the police department because of the union contract that are not in that same situation. And then finally, there was a reduction of $9,714, which was the proposed increase in the stipends for coaches. And so it's not reducing the stipends that coaches currently get. It was eliminating the funding available for the increase that was proposed. And it was not for a recognition that the stipend schedule hasn't changed in well over a decade, but we just couldn't justify that at this point given the priorities for other educational purposes. So those total changes are $192,192. That's a lot of numbers. So now I think we're ready for your comments. If you'd like to speak, please come up forward to the microphone and state your name and address for the record, and then share your comments or questions. This is just on the operating budget. We'll get to the warrant articles as we did after this. Can you pull the mic up a little bit? Just there you go.
Just want to make one comment first. Even though there was no increase here and there on salaries, actually there is an increase, 2% of Social Security money given to the wage earners like yourselves, the school, the town, right? The payroll tax.
There is no change. If I was getting paid $100 this year, next year underneath this budget,
Well, I'm just trying to bring this up because there is money in there.
Yeah.
2% will be taken off their salaries, which means that they'll pay 2% less than the payroll tax. They extended it this year. Well, I want to bring that point up. I mean, they're getting raises. Who's over making so much? You get 2% less off their pay, right? Before I bring anything else up, I mean,
sounds like you're talking about the federal payroll tax, and that Congress might have.
that's Social Security. It goes into Social Security fund.
Okay.
We took a look at it for two years. That's why, as a senior citizen, I come up here and discuss different things because it's hard on us what's happened this year, what might happen in the next 2 or 3 years. Anyway, this contract that if they don't come into any decision, it refers back to the contract they have now.
Yes.
That's correct.
So
And
they're
that
getting
would be,
raises on the
No.
contract, but they're getting no raises?
the contract we have now carries forward, so that means the definition of benefits, the health insurance rates, the sick days, all of the things described do carry forward. What stays status quo are the methods of compensation. People stay at their same level of compensation with the one exception that I described.
Because I want to discuss also that I never knew that teachers got bonuses. A bonus.
Well, yeah.
No, there was some mix-up on the bonus, wasn't there?
You know, the best way to describe that is teachers got what is in their contract and what was interpreted to be in their contract, and so it's part of their compensation, as it has been for several years, and it will remain part of their compensation moving forward. It won't increase, just as salaries won't increase, but it will remain a part of their compensation.
When I saw something up there, I saw a $5,000 increase in certain teachers. It was beyond their increments, or what you want to call it, stages, right? You were supposed to get $1,000, right?
The contract that was interpreted that does add this year $6,000 on top of the top salary scale. But that was, again, longevity is the best way to describe it, and that's what their contract is.
Because, I mean, I just want to, I know I read the part about Brian Harwood's approach about that, whether it was supposed to be every year or just one year or what? Apparently it was given 4 or 5 years, right?
We are just finishing a 2-year contract. And prior to this, there was a 3-year contract. And that language has been in both of those contracts. So it's been 5 years.
Well, the only, like I say, I'm not fighting against the teachers. I'm just saying I think they're paid very well in Newmarket, as well as any other town around here. Because I remember Stratham saying, well, that their teachers were getting a little over 60,000, and that they figured they were the highest ones in the state. And quite a few of our teachers are making $67,000 paid.
Unfortunately, the majority of our teachers aren't paid at that level. And the scale
Well,
is not regionally competitive, but we weren't able to get to a settlement to change that. That board had we just weren't able to get, able to settle a contract. And so whatever is in place now is what continues next year, and then we'll hopefully at some point begin negotiations again and try and get to a new contract for the next year.
According to the figures I looked at, there was over 30-something teachers getting over 60,000, 62, 63. I'm trying to use that figure because they say they're only getting 40 or 50.
I think that's accurate. I think
all I'd like to see is the truth given out on salary,
right.
Period. And then put 25, 30% on top of that for benefit, which means that could bring that 60-something thousand up to about 80,000. I'm talking about benefits on a contract. So I'm just trying to say we got to hold something down a little bit, because you said yourself that 85% of the budget is salary. And that's why we have a problem.
Salaries and benefits. Salaries and benefits.
No, I'm just saying that's why we have a problem. The teachers should help us out too to build this school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Larry?
Just to help Ed a little bit out on what he was saying about the Social Security situation, as a worker, you pay into the Social Security system 6-point-something%, your employer matches it. Last year, they gave you a break. The employee pays 2% less. This is what Ed was alluding to. They've extended that for another year. So what he's saying is you're getting a little extra money, perhaps $1,000 in your paycheck that you wouldn't have had. However, what they're not telling you, eventually they're going to ask each and every one of you to pay 8.5% to make up for this, because there'll be some sort of a shortfall. So it's kind of a false thing that we're going through. But anyways, right now it feels good to some. I got a question, and I guess we're not really answering questions tonight, Brian.
No, you can ask questions.
Okay.
Sure.
The question is about busing. Are we doing any busing that's not mandated by the state? Any student pickups that we're not mandated to be doing? I know a while ago, before the sidewalk was built in New Village, we had a bus running down there to pick up students, and I don't remember if it was elementary, it perhaps was elementary students. Has that ended since the sidewalk has been in place? And I guess the ultimate question is, are we busing students that we're really not mandated to bus? That's my first question.
I'm unable to answer that question.
I know, and I didn't think anyone.
Thinking somebody to my right.
I didn't think anyone could do it here tonight, but if anyone has the answer for me, I'd appreciate it.
I'll get you that answer.
Okay. Thank you. And another question to Brian would be the $192,192 that the Budget Committee made reductions. What does that equal in taxes, cents?
Well, about $745,000 is $1 on the tax rate. So Drew's calculating it for me, my vice chair.
26 cents.
About 26 cents, give or take.
26 cents. Thank you. Thank you for those efforts. And the last thing I would like to bring up, and I brought this up on the town end last year, and perhaps this is not the forum, but something to think about, because you can rest assured I'll be asking the same question at the deliberative session, so just to gear you up for it. Last year on the town side, we voted to put salaries, all the town employee salaries, in the town reports. That was voted on by the town council, and it happened. And my assumption that will stay in place. Is that a correct assumption on the town end?
I'm not on the town council. Al, do you have?
Okay. So I guess my question here would be, well, a statement would be, I'd like to see the same thing to make it fair for both entities, to have all the school employees published and put into their booklet also. Thank you.
I know the budget committee's received a printout of all the.
Yeah, I know that.
salaries.
Thank you. I'm sending the message to the proper folks.
Yes, you are.
They can do what they'd like with it. But rest assured, I'll be asking the same thing at the deliberative session. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Anybody else have? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there sneaking up.
Glenn Dodds, Neil Mill Road. I had a couple questions. Clarification on benefits increase. If I understood correctly, the town saw a small savings in insurance benefits this year, but the school went up. Are they not getting benefits to the same government program, different? They privatized?
They're not getting through the same program. There was, I believe there was an effort where the town and school evaluated having one provider, and the town has had some significant health costs, and that makes the town's portion a higher, they're seen as a higher risk, and that would have increased the school's rates. So that's why it hasn't happened to date. The town clerk, tax collector, Becky Benvenuti, was very involved with those discussions. If people have detailed questions, I'm sure she has those answers.
My other question was on the sabbatical. I assume that's a sabbatical for training and higher education. Is there any kind of contract in place so when that employee comes back, they don't seek employment elsewhere?
Yes, it's all spelled out in the teacher's contract, and the obligation on the employee is to work for us for at least 2 years after, and if she leaves before that, then she has to repay us.
Thank you.
Thank you. I thought you knew the budget back and forth with your wife on the board.
William Foster, Lane's Lane. First, let me make one, bear with me. I'm 42 years old, been working since 19. I may never see Social Security, just so you know. We've been paying it, that's federal government's fault, not Newmarket town government's fault. On the back of the page, it says there's roughly $12 million for salary and benefits, approximately 85% of the total budget. I just want to publicly plead, teachers, I love you. You raise my kids 5 days out of the week, but we need you to bend a little bit. We need your help. This district is in need. These people behind me, some of these people may not like you as much, may not love you as much, and want to cut salaries a lot. I believe it's a warrant, separate, Brian, help me, it's a separate warrant article when it comes to teacher salary?
Yes,
it is.
When the new contract comes.
So I'm hoping the teachers in their negotiations are doing the due diligence, because it could get voted down and then you're stuck where you're at. Instead of progressing any further, you would be defaulting to your old contract. Thank you.
Thank you.
A general question. In both the town budget and the school budget, I know there's been a lot of details discussed and a lot of reviews of operating expenses, et cetera. But we've been in a difficult economic environment, and I think that's no surprise to anybody. We appear to continue to be in that difficult economic environment without a lot of hope on the horizon. And I'm sort of sitting back here just from a strategic sense saying, I've heard no discussion on staffing. Everything we've talked about tonight has been little bits and pieces of operating expenses or a half a body or something like that. And I'm just wondering why. I know in the town council and in the budget committee's discussion, there was at least a proposal to put a task, whether it was on the town or the school, of a few percent on their overall salary budget for them to figure out where they can do that for the benefit of the taxpayers. There seems to be no efficiency on people in the salary line. And I was just wondering if some of the budget committee members or the school board could comment on why we're not doing at least some partial tight belting on the staffing side.
The majority of the budget committee did not think that reductions in staffing was the way to go. That's the simple answer for the budget committee.
I'd like to just make a quick comment to remind us of the comments of Dr. Hayes earlier about moving some staff from the elementary school to the junior senior high school, as well as a couple other changes that were highlighted.
I can too. If this goes out, okay, good. In last year's budget, we initially cut 5.5 positions, so we made some significant belt tightening last year. And then there was a second round which occurred later that spring, and we cut several positions then. I don't remember the exact amount. And although we could have restored some of them because the scenario wasn't as bad as it looked, we decided not to because we were in anticipation that if it wasn't last year, it'd be this year. So let's just hold on. So we made a lot of reductions in our staffing last year, and so you see not too many here, but some changes here that are for the good. But last year was a heavy hit for the school district.
And Russ, also there were on the budget committee meeting that we had last, there was a motion made to reduce the overall staffing of the school by 5%, which would have been a reduction of $411,000. That was voted down. And there was also another motion to cut a second grade teacher because the class sizes were so small, and again, that was voted down. But there was some attempt by some members of the budget committee to look into staff reduction.
Anyone else like to provide feedback, ask questions?
Marcia Carr, Riverbend Road. Just a general question. How many special needs students do we have? And how is that funded? Is that funded through federal, or is that part of our operating budget?
The funding is through both federal and district budget, so it's a combination. We get an entitlement grant every year for special education. The exact number, 187 students out of roughly 1,065.
Okay. And also, what is the Newmarket dropout rate?
I think it's small. It's under 1%. It's very small.
Okay.
You do a good job.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, it looks like that's all the questions at this point. So the next item on the agenda is one of the warrant articles, which is Article 1, and I'm going to just turn it over to the school administration or school board to outline these. Again, just to remind folks, the budget committee has not been presented with the warrant articles, so we don't have detailed information or discussion on our end yet.
I'm going to be referring to this blue sheet that was one of the handouts. Article 1 is to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1 million and undefined yet dollars to purchase 4 properties along South Main Street for the construction of a new junior-senior high school. And the funds for this will come out of two sources. One is the expansion of school facilities capital reserve fund, and I believe there's about $1.1 million remaining in that fund. And then the open space bond fund, where $380,000, $380,173 to be exact, is in that fund. We have requested use of that money to purchase this land should the voters approve. The Conservation Commission first had to weigh in, and they voted support of this use, and now it goes to Town Council, and I believe it's on their agenda tomorrow evening. So we still have this article here using that language with optimism that they will support it as well. And you see a drawing on here of the 4 properties. There are 3 owners. I am working on purchase and sale agreements. Actually, I've completed one, and I think I'm only days away from finalizing the other 2. And I can't wait so that I can then put out there the exact cost of what this will be and the parameters in the purchase and sale agreement. I would tell you, I know I read in the newspaper today 1.6 million, not sure where we got that number, but I've always said it's between 1.2 and 1.5 million. And again, very soon I'll be giving you exact numbers on that.
Anyone have any questions on Article 1 or comments? I know the school board had a very involved discussion and presentation on this recently too, so. Okay. Article 2.
Article 3 deals with fire and life safety. It's probably gotten more attention in this community than anything else we do in the schools. And the voters approved last year $200,000, which we are still working hard to maximize to address fire and life safety issues in the school. But that was part of a 4-phase plan where annually we had to do certain things. And so the number that you see here, $769,270, is what was outlined in that plan. And so that's year 2 of the plan. And we'd have to raise and appropriate that money, so you see that it does have a tax increase of $1.03 per thousand. The thing that's unique about this proposal, though, is that it seeks to establish a new capital reserve fund for the district, because we don't have one that has the kind of dual purpose that we're looking for. One purpose clearly is for fire and life safety, but the wishes of the board are, and many in the community that we've spoken to, are that if we get to move forward with a new high school, that money is better spent toward a new high school. And so you see that the title here is Construction of a New School Building and Renovation of Existing School Buildings for Fire and Life Safety Code Compliance. So it has that dual function, and it names the school board as the agents of that fund, such that at the proper time, when more facts are known, they can make a decision. Do we have to go forward with the fire and life safety? If we do, we do them. And if we can hold on to that money for a potential school construction project, they would do that as well.
Anybody have any comments or questions on Article 3? Sorry, I misstated Article 3.
Can I ask a question about Article 2? We kind of skipped over it.
Article 2 is the operating budget?
Well, we talked about the operating budget, but it's a separate article. But it's just a quick question.
Sure, you can ask a question. I just wondered.
I know the Budget Committee hasn't seen it. I'm just wondering, is the Budget Committee possibly going to recommend it for Article 2?
Oh, you mean the first one,
The actual Article 2 of the operating budget. I'm wondering if the Budget Committee is looking in, without the other recommendations of 405% decrease in salaries and all that. Does the Budget Committee foresee recommending that budget for Article 2?
My assumption would be that a majority of the committee would support the budget as it's been currently devised by the committee, but we're meeting the 26th to finalize our recommendations.
Thank you. On Article 3, could I make a recommendation to the school board of changing one word? I don't know if it can be done or not. to see if the school district will vote to establish a capital reserve fund for the construction of a new school or renovating. And that's the big word, is instead of and, can we change it to or? I believe there's a roughly $2 million worth of fire life safety. We did about $200,000 worth of work already, 769. There's another $7.75 roughly. That would mean approximately 1.5 million going into this building. If it's an and, so if that land is not purchased, we have the money to spend for fire and life safety, but it is purchased. We don't have to. I'm just wondering if that word and kind of makes it so we have to renovate this building. And I don't want to dump on 1.5 million into this place, because I'm assuming the fire and life safety is in the older part of the building, which is the wood floors, plaster ceilings. I've been in this building before. I know what it is. I'm just wondering if does it have to be and, can it be or?
I can respond to that. I don't. This is language that came from our attorney, and I get your point. I would remind folks that even though we may think we're building a new school and we'd like to build a new school, fire officials have a different view of the timeline, and so the board could be put into a position where it would need to spend some of this money to do some fire and life safety, because the fire marshal and fire officials want to see us make continual progress. I think there's some flexibility in here, but as the calendar moves further out, there might be more pressure to have to do some work. I get it. Maybe it's an and or, but I can talk with the attorney. But one of the things that I didn't describe in here is that really it's meant for two major projects. One is an elevator stairwell. The other is renovating a portion of the building so that we have safe emergency egress from some upstairs science labs.
Mr. Foster.
The reason why I asked for the or was, would it not show the state fire marshal that we are doing due diligence in trying to fix the overall problem, which is the building itself and or building a new school? With the appropriate sum of $769,000 and change, and next year's sum of whatever it is, the fire and life safety of renovating the older part of the building, I'm assuming, does that direct connect to the state standards of education of making classrooms smaller? Because from the presentation that I saw, some of the presentations, it was shortened, not by your fault, that we have to move hallways, we have to change the way things are. So are we making rooms even smaller by expanding hallways and changing egresses? Because if we are, then we're just making the building more out of state code, other than being able to escape in a fire, which isn't important, but other than educational needs.
Right. The elevator stairwell doesn't take away from instructional space. The other problem, the egress from the science labs, does. It takes away from some special ed space, and I believe it's going to also take some space from the science labs themselves. So there is some negative impact there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Sherry Day, 3 Lady Slipper. So my question is, from what I understand, we're going to lose some instructional space with these fire and life safety improvements, right? So if we spend $1.8 million on these fire and life safety improvements, what's next? Does that take care of the building for another 3 years, 5 years, 20, 50? Are we going to need to rent portables maybe to house whatever instructional space is diminished by the fire and life safety? I guess my question is, okay, $2 million now, then what? What doesn't that address, that $2 million? Does that make sense?
It addresses fire and life safety, and as a corollary, a lot of the ADA accessibility issues, ramps and so forth. But the things that don't get addressed are the mechanical, electrical, plumbing issues, boiler, ventilation. A lot of those systems are really outlived their useful life as well.
So basically, we could spend this $1.8 million with another big project or projects facing us to fix after that,
I
potentially?
think that's safe to say.
Okay.
If we're
So
going to
we
stay in
could-
there for some time, yes.
Yeah, so we could conceivably continue to fund $2 million projects every few years.
Yes, and you're going to see later on, there is a warrant article here for $40,000, which would take to do the engineering analysis to determine the expense it will take to repair mechanical, electrical, plumbing issues. And again, even when you've done all of that, you still don't have spaces that comply with state minimum standards for classroom size and hallway widths and things of that sort. So you still haven't solved all of your problems, but at least that would give us some number.
Okay. Do we have any sense of when those problems would need to be addressed? The mechanical, plumbing, et cetera, are those good to go for a while?
We, looking to get the principal over there.
I wouldn't
and
expect you
I
to
think
know. I
Every
wouldn't
day
expect you
every
to
day
know.
that the boiler's working is a good day, I think is how he described it to me.
Okay, so we can
So-
put this money in, but there's no guarantees that something isn't going to need to be done right after.
You're absolutely right.
Okay,
You're
thank you.
absolutely right.
Anyone else on Article 3? Okay, proceeding to Article 4.
Article 4 is on the reverse side. There are different stages in a construction project. We've completed stage 1, which is schematic design, which is testing, doing all the tests and surveys on the site to make sure it's a viable site, and then drawing a design of a building that we know fits on the building and can be constructed on that building given the geotechnical studies and things of that sort. So we've completed that, and it is a viable site, and we have a terrific schematic design. The second stage is called design development, and this is the stage where you get much more detailed in terms of your drawings. You involve more people in terms of the specifics that are part of it, the materials, and what you're going to do for green energy concepts, and you really get into the finer details. Design development at its end arrives at another cost estimate because you've got more refined data to deal with. But as I've written in my notes here, design development cost for us is approximately $550,000. And I recommended to the board, I'm not, as much as I would like to see that work done and get to that new cost estimate, I don't think any of us was eager to put something on the warrant that would add more to the tax burden at this time. And so we took a look at what we felt was available in the expansion of school facilities capital reserve fund and felt that we could at least make some headway towards doing that design development work. We anticipate that within the next year, there will be an application process defined by the state to apply for state funding of our project. And what they will be doing is prioritizing projects based on criteria such as what we're seeing. Safety, school facilities in poor condition, and enrollment, and so forth. And the legislature is working on defining this, and if things go optimistically, that will be known sometime in June, and I imagine to be an application process sometime probably in the fall. So the more defined our project is, the more project ready and clearly defined, then we think the better our application, and that's why I've recommended and the board has supported this warrant article for $150,000 to begin that design development process.
Any comments or questions on Article 4? And this would be withdrawn from the expansion of school facilities fund.
Yes.
So it's not additional, it's not a new tax rate cost. It's a race, Ed. You got someone coming. Okay.
Not very gracefully done, but Elizabeth Dudley of Smith Garrison Road. And my question is really for the taxpayers to see some sort of alternative presented in terms of what explorations have been made? I know that it's led to impasses in the past about inabilities to join up with other regional systems, but I still, for one, would like to see a clear articulation of efforts that have been made to balance the other option of our having to support an entire school system for just our one town.
If for options, I think you're describing attempts to join with other towns to help solve this problem.
Yes.
The attempts were begun last spring, and meetings held in the fall. We contacted, I believe, 6 school districts and had conversations with 3 of them. And the bottom line is that there is no opportunity for us, either through a merger or through a tuition agreement, that's going to be a long-term solution for Newmarket schools. The only place that the only 2 places that had any conversation were all short-term, no more than 5 years. Portsmouth would take, well, I shouldn't say it that way. Portsmouth was willing to discuss taking all 300 of our high school students for up to 5 years. Oyster River was willing to discuss taking up to 100 students, again, no more than 5 years. And so I think that's perceived as a safety valve, if you will, in case we have to close this school or a portion of this school in order to go forward. I would say, again, you want crystal clarity. When we met, we only met with the superintendent in those districts and 2 school board members. And this was just an interest-seeking conversation to see where it would go. If we were more serious, the conversation becomes much more engaged in their political process. In Portsmouth, as an example, we have to deal with their entire school board. That school board would have to support it. And then because their school department is a department within the city structure, the city council would have to approve that as well. So politically, there would be a long road even to get to that arrangement. And in terms of a long-term solution, there is no opportunity for us.
I for one, would like to see what you've described outlined on paper and just to make sure that really further negotiations aren't warranted with any of these different schools. And to me, it seems that when we're balancing, I mean, there are no predictions here about how much this school would cost and what that would mean ultimately to the tax impact. I mean, it's nice that these little, well, not so little design fees have no immediate tax impact, but of course, there's going to be quite a substantial tax impact, and I think that it would be beneficial for all the taxpayers to see other alternatives that may not even have been articulated to a certain extent of certainty, but even just see. So 5 years in Portsmouth, what would that be for each student? What would that tuition be? I think that would be valuable for the taxpayers, and I don't know if that could be made public.
On the school district website, if you go to the facilities page, you'll see a description of all the efforts and contacts that we made relative to merger, which would give us a seat at the table, or a tuition agreement. Very honestly, I made every effort to try and be successful with that because it's about the kids, and that may have been their only best option. We had several conversations with folks representing Epping to the point where we looked at a draft tuition agreement. That agreement was put on hold, and that discussion was put on hold because it was in March or near March, and Epping decided to put it to the voters. Were they interested in a tuition agreement with us? And they pretty clearly said no, they weren't. But to give you some data off of that tuition agreement, we would have to have paid Epping, its per pupil rate for every one of our 300 students. Right now, or excuse me, last year, Epping paid $1,300 more per student for educating its high school students. So there's an added expense. The tuition for special needs students in that lease agreement would have been 50% more than for a regular ed student. So that adds to the expense. And then there were other, if there were other special, if you will, or unique special ed experiences or situations, there was additional expense. So it was going to be a more expensive venture. There's no question in my mind, especially when you add in all of the increased transportation. Portsmouth, my recollection is, again, Epping was $1,300 more per student. Portsmouth was somewhere around $550 per student. And I'm not certain, but I think Oyster River was about $1,000 more per student.
And there's no way, I guess, to foresee what it will be for the Newmarket residents to pay per capita per student with a brand new school.
I don't have that. I don't have that data yet. Certainly, the board hasn't wrestled with. I have information regarding different scenarios for bonding, and the board's going to look at that Thursday night, and we'll start to put our arms around that and see which one we're most comfortable with, and obviously be shared publicly. But no, I don't have that data right now.
Okay, because I also want the best for the students, and and it just seems as if I think for many of us to see if it's really viable for this small community to support a school that will give the students the service it needs, and that's an open question, I think.
Right now, we own the problem, and no one else wants to help us solve it. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
We do send pupils to Epping for football, right?
We do have a combined team for football.
So what is the cost of that to us?
What is the cost? $7,500 per student? No, $7,500 fee.
Now, knowing that I played football myself, they'd have to stay after school sometime to practice and all that. Well, how do they get back? Well, how do they get there and come back? By personal, by bus, or what?
I think they get there on their own transportation, but I can tell you every athletic program I've been involved with is academics comes first. So if they have to stay here to deal with academic issues, then they miss practice.
Before I say my next statement, many years ago, I went around collecting petitions to build this gymnasium. So, I mean, I was for a lot of things in Newmarket and for this and that. And I believed in a big gymnasium like this because I remember when they used to play in the town hall, I mean, you take 2 steps and you're there. But I mean, I spent a lot of time collecting signatures and everything else for it. It's nice to have a school, but it gets so expensive after a while that you agree with me that a larger school has more options of different courses in a small school.
I don't disagree. I think we do a terrific job of providing a broad spectrum of courses.
Well, you come from Massachusetts.
But I don't disagree. A larger school has even more opportunities. Yeah.
They can have more outside, well, a lot of things. Because I know I went to high school, I joined the cadet corps, like an army thing. Well, anyway, beside the point of that is, an architecture or engineer that designs a school, and you accept it, now, does he get a commission?
Last year, the voters approved $170,000 to do all of this schematic work.
I know, but if you build
moving forward, is there more money in it for the architectural firm? Sure there is.
I mean, if you build his design, does he get a commission for that?
Yes. They're with you right through the construction process.
Because, I mean, I read the paper recently, and that $53 million would increase the tax rate by $5. That scared me. I don't think I could afford it. And I'm just saying that's what scares me. I mean, it seems like we're going to go way over $30 a thousand after a while because it seems we didn't cut the budget too much at school or the town. to. And they tell me that if it wasn't for that fault money that was, what, 400,000 to down to what, to 300,000 now? Fault.
I'm not,
The gentleman that spoke before, that they had 400 and something thousand, that money that if it would have gone into the state, our tax rate would have been $3.89.
right.
Is that right?
The revenue misstatement,
I
yes.
mean, we got to control it somewhere. I mean, you're gonna be tough. That's all I can say. I mean, plain language, you're gonna be tough and cut where you have to cut, because I don't know how people are riled up in this town. It may hurt.
I know.
It might hurt. That's all I'm saying. Because I mean, I'm not trying to say I'm going to pass away right away, but I mean, I'm not going to be around a long time, but a lot of people are going to be here longer, and I say that it's going to be hard for us to probably get rid of our property, or we probably can give it away, but I'm just saying, I think people now with the mortgage, and they look at the tax rate now, when a person's going to buy a house, they want to see what the tax rate is. You agree?
Yes.
And that means a lot, because all I keep reading is foreclosures, foreclosures, foreclosures. Mostly single homes. It's going to get worse. And you're going to be tough. I mean, I don't mean do something that probably hurts something along the way, but something you can do away with and not hurt anybody. That's the town budget or even the school.
Okay.
Because the state is going to be broke. And they're going to vote on a thing now, but they don't want to bring that income tax up no more, state income tax, which means we'll never have a state income tax to compensate for the money we need. Because if you look at Maine there, all around Kittery Rock, tax rate, $6, $7, $8. They have a sales tax and they have an income tax. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to have one of those too. Because I don't think single home can survive. I mean, I'm just trying to make a statement, that's all.
Okay.
The point of view of us elderly, because we retired. I'm not saying that we have everything Social Security, but we did save our money. We didn't go to Disneyland when we were young and all that, so we saved our money in that. But meanwhile, what we were making for pay, it's hard, because when the taxes go up $1,000 for us, it's a lot.
Yep.
And the town don't give us much breaks on seniors in this town. I mean, Portsmouth and Exeter, we could probably get a tax break in Exeter, because they have a better thing for senior, but that's another issue, what didn't come up with you before. But all I'm saying is we gotta be tough, and you gotta help us. Like I say.
Okay.
Because I won't be doing much of this anymore anyway, but no, I'm just saying, I just want to make a
Thank you.
thing on it. Do the best you can, and cut if you have to cut some more. Thank you.
Hi, Amy Thompson again. I had a question that I'm hoping is how did we arrive at this architect for this? Was the architect or design fees put out to bid for the architectural firm that we have chosen? And what was the field? Who was considered, I suppose?
It was put out to bid some years ago, and I'm not sure the exact year. And I think they interviewed or looked at maybe 10 or so different, and then they hired a company called Team Design, and so Team Design has been married to our efforts ever since. Team Design changed their company name, if you will, to Harriman Associates, but it's been the same firm that we've had all along, and it just made sense that we've been working with them, that we continued with them through, at the time was the elementary, and so they are very familiar with us. They've been with Newmarket for, I would bet, at least 6 years, 5-6 years.
Well, coming from that background, it seems to me that sometimes you do want to switch up a little bit because people get a little comfortable. I will say that when he was coming up with design proposals and saying that there were no good contractors in New Hampshire, as far as building a new school. I take exception to that. But that also helps the current architect's, I think, preference for design build where he's in charge. And I think that that's a conflict of interest. So I'm wondering if the firm could be looked at again, if we could put that out to bid again with somebody that can come up to speed, that has worked on schools before, for instance, and maybe could come in a little more affordably and maybe a little faster for us. You know, just so that we mix it up just a little bit without obviously doing ourselves in and having to completely reinvent the wheel. But I think the design fees are high, is my point of view, just coming from that kind of background. And I think that we could be a little more efficient with that and a little more streamlined going forward. And ideally, just to put it out there, my preference is for a construction management account with a guaranteed not to exceed and potentially a bonus for however much they come in under the proposed budget. So that's down the road, I understand that, but thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rick Martineau. I live at 6 Bay Road. I just had a few comments, one of which I am in public education, and so I'm a huge advocate for public education. But what I'm amazed at is having been in several districts and working in public education for a long time, I look at school districts, and for example, Region 9, the Governor Wentworth District, that has just spent, they had a $75 million renovation to their high school. It's a district that serves 10 communities. And to think that a district like ours, the size of ours, that serves such a small amount and is so small in general and only serves its own community, could fathom spending $55 million on a new building is beyond me. I'm totally amazed. Newer doesn't mean smarter children. Newer doesn't mean better education. I think that directing the efforts, instead of spending this $170,000 at looking at something across the street, instead of spending $40,000 in the next article on looking at this building in this location and making it a better place for the students that are here, I think that's something we should really consider. Thank you.
William Foster, Langs Lane. Just to clarify something that Mr. Coriata talked about. As of December 1st, 2011, the local education tax for Newmarket was $14.87 per thousand. Durham, $15.69. East Kingston, $14.04. Epping, the big school everybody wants to go to, $16.34 per thousand local tax. Exeter serves 6 different districts of towns, $13.89. Fremont, $20.54. Lee, $17.91. We're pretty comparable to everybody else, and some of them were pretty low.
Anybody else? Ed, hold on. Let's see if there's anyone else that hasn't spoken yet. I'm going to do that for everybody that's spoken already. If you haven't spoken yet and you want to talk about Article 4, which is using $150,000 from the existing fund, this is your chance. I'd like to keep it, it's 9:30. I'd like to keep it on Article 4. Anyone else for Article 4?
I'd like to make a brief comment on the article.
Sure. Mr. Chase?
One thing that, let Chris catch up with me with the microphone. One thing that I'm not sure I heard, so if I'm repeating an earlier comment, I apologize. But these funds coming from this capital reserve fund under past state reimbursement programs and what looks like something with what's being drafted now, a percentage of these monies spent would be reimbursable through the state aid program. So we would get, if the old formula applied, perhaps 30% of this money back, unless I'm incorrect.
You're right.
Thank you.
If I could comment on the funding. I'm not a big fan of the funding because we end up spending more to be reimbursed. I equate that to me having a coupon for bread at the store. I'm going to go buy a $3 loaf of bread so I could save 20 cents when normally I'd buy the 99-cent store brand. And that's kind of the way I feel about some of this funding we go after. We have to do more to get the funding, so does it really save us any money in the long run? We just basically build what we need, we might be further ahead.
Okay, I think we're ready to go to Article 5.
Article 5, as I mentioned just briefly a moment ago, would seek to raise and appropriate $40,000 for the purpose of architectural and engineering fees associated with renovation addition of the junior-senior high school, and would authorize withdrawal of that amount from the expansion of school facilities capital reserve fund. And the purpose of this is to do an engineering analysis of the current facility to try and determine a cost for bringing it up to current construction codes, especially as it means mechanical, electrical, plumbing. What it does not do is address the minimum state standards for school spaces. It doesn't do a redesign. As you heard me just describe the schematic step. This is not money that would do a schematic for this building. I have been talking with the architect about trying to find some way that we could, if it's not a schematic, at least a bubble drawing to try and estimate what is buildable on this land. And so I'm trying to get that information as soon as possible so that it gives more clarity to whether or not to vote for this article. And but that's still in process. But in any case, that gives us some, because earlier in the last several weeks, the question was raised, what would it cost to do these other renovations? Because all of our focus has been on fire and life safety. So this $40,000 does that engineering analysis so that the architectural firm can put a number it can stand behind.
All right, we'll open up for public comment on Article 5.
Sorry, Amy Thompson again.
That's okay.
I'm trying not to hog it. I think, Dr. Hayes, that is what I'm hearing as well, is that people really would like to know if the school was renovated here or expanded to, I mean, we understand that there's classroom size issues and that sort of thing, perhaps with the parking over at the Carpenter land or whatever it is. What does it take? Because I think there's some balance. I like the coupon example. That's exactly right. That's what we do every week if the coupon doesn't save us anything. So I think that was a good point. But you know, we don't want to dress up a pig, to use a phrase. But if we spent $50 million, I mean, pick a number, on a new school, and we took 25 years to pay for it, 25 years down the road, by the time we got done paying for it, it would not be a new school anymore. And so I think seeing a parallel of, okay, if we spent $2 million a year on this school, for how long to do whatever in 25 years? Do we come out at the same point, I guess is what I'm asking, over 25 years of spending $2 million or 20 years of spending $2 million? What do we get out of potentially doing something with this building that, since we have to do fire safety, you know, there's things that we need to do now before a new school ever got constructed, that, you know, looking at this and also saying, well, if we spend more, do we get state aid? Well, maybe we don't get certain state aid to fix up this building, but maybe we don't need it because we can get out of it for $30 million instead of $50 million, you know? So I'd be interested to know if that could be undertaken in a serious manner with this 40,000, or if that's been done already and just plain old ruled out. I don't.
No, I think some efforts were done in the past to take a look at renovating this current facility, but it came to a halt because clearly there's not enough square footage in this footprint to make that happen. And
Is there if we move parking, for instance?
no, because it's
you know,
possible, and that's why we're looking at it. I mean, really, I think the facilities committee has looked at this. I know myself and the architect have looked at this and feel like this is not a viable option. But you're absolutely right, and that's why I wrote the comment here. There's enough interest within the community that question has to be addressed. And people need to see with clarity either we're right or we're wrong. But if it's a viable option, people ought to want to know that.
Right.
And so we need to, all along here it's been, let's explore every possible opportunity or option that we have for these kids and find the best solution, long-term solution for the community. And so that's what this money is intended to try and do, is give more clarity to this particular site as a continuing facility.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. I mean, I really do. I do care about all of this. I don't need things falling apart. I haven't heard that there's major structural issues here, but there are building problems. There are codes. There's updated mechanical. The old two-pipe system with the one boiler was never good on the middle temperatures. All of those sorts of things. So I think that would be a real good gesture to do, if I may say so.
Again, if you're familiar with one of the concerns here is the seismic requirements that fall on this facility, that likely there weren't even requirements back when much of it was built. So that's a big question mark.
Right, and what can we get away with? And I think the other thing is too that whether it's tuitioning temporarily, I know parents moved here. If they wanted their kids to go to Portsmouth or Epping, they would have moved there. I mean, and I've heard that, and I certainly understand that. Do we do portables for a while, renovate half the building, get it up to code? How can we do it within what we already have? It's like me deciding if I need, underpants or socks. I mean, something's got to give.
No, I get it. When the voters voted to prompt us to talk with other communities, it was about merger. That was the term that was used in the article, and merger really is a shared governance.
Yeah.
As I said, puts the board at the table in decision making, and no one was really interested in that, and so I'm sorry, I lost
as
my train
opposed
of thought.
as opposed to tuitioning out.
Yes.
Which is a different, or co-op. I mean, I grew up in Hollis. We had a co-op agreement with Brookline. Brookline paid in for their students. They didn't really have any control. Right. But at some point, Brookline got big enough where they were a huge burden on what the Hollis taxpayers paid. So, I mean, that isn't always the thing either. But if we can do it and keep it self-contained within this little town, that would be great. I just think a whole new building. I don't know. I'm not convinced yet.
I know where it's going.
But I am convinced we need to do something. Don't misunderstand me.
You talked about portables, and right now there's no apparent space in town where we could put the number of portables that we need. So when the voters talk merger,
right,
I convinced people that the conversation also needs to be long-term tuition or short-term tuition, because Portsmouth High, with its offer, in my mind, are our portables. That buys us 5 years of education somewhere else while we do something on this site.
And and what's the viability? Because again, it may cost us a little more, individually per pupil while we renovate that. But
I know, I get it. It was meant to develop all the options.
Okay.
We need to develop.
I appreciate hearing that. I don't think that message has come through a lot. We're hearing new school, and I think we need to back up the bus a little bit because most of us just can't afford it, but what else do we do?
I understand.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sherry Day, Three Lady Slipper. I have two questions. One relates back to Article 1. And I have heard that if, say we found out that renovating was the way we need to go, I have heard that the land across the street could assist us in that renovation in housing portables, housing construction equipment. I've heard something to that effect that no matter what we do, that the land across the street from the current high school could be beneficial whether a new school was built there or the current site was renovated. Can you clarify that?
I agree. I mean, it gives you options. As I just described, there's no place in town to put, multiple portable buildings as we have behind the elementary school.
And do the portables need sewer and water run to them?
Yes.
Okay, so they do get to have bathrooms if they're in the portables?
Yeah, you need to have, yeah, it's like a temporary school.
Do we need that $40,000 survey to tell us that that land across the street would be beneficial during a renovation?
The 40,000 is not for land across the street, it's purely
No,
for
no,
this
no, I
building.
mean, would that survey tell us that, or do we just, I mean, can we say with great assurance that yes, the land across the street would be helpful? Would this survey confirm that? Would they, you know?
If you're talking Article 5 has nothing to do with the land across the street.
No, no, what I'm saying is, if we found out that the cost of renovating, now let me back up. So with Article 5,
Yes.
this $40,000 is going to tell us potentially how much it would cost to renovate or add on.
Right.
Would potentially that study also tell us how the land across the street could be used during a renovation?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my other question is, I don't know if any part of the renovation analysis would include the cost of maintaining a new building or maintaining that building versus a new building. And my question relates back to Kelly Foster had sent out a document that mentioned a new construction can cost up to 85% less to maintain, even if an older building is running at its maximum efficiency. So if that is truly the case, I would be very curious as to what continued costs would be to maintain the renovated building versus a new building. If the costs, I mean, if the energy efficiency in a newer building could save us money year to year, what might it be?
Yeah, it's hard at this point of the construction design process to pull out a number like that and make a statement. On the one hand, this is a very inefficient building to heat and maintain. So we know it's an expensive proposition. But we're looking at a facility that is going from, this is 84,000, it's going to, would be 185,000. So clearly there's a larger expense to operate and maintain, but you'd have more efficient systems, and certainly we're targeting to put more green energy concepts in so that we can do a lot of energy conservation things.
Thank you.
Tony Weinstein, 275 Ash Swamp Road. And my question is, it's been my understanding that renovation isn't an option on this site. And so, I hate to do this, but to go back to Article 1, without the land, there is no renovation option. Is that correct? Is that assumption correct? Renovation to bring it up to code and to do not just like fire and life safety, but the DOE codes and everything that we need to do to make the school.
There are state standards for minimum classroom size and minimum size for other places like cafeteria and kitchen and so forth, and that's written in the law. And by and large, the school board has to comply with that. And it's with that guidance that has led us to this 185,000 square foot design. In fact, the same guidance led to another different design, but 185,000 square feet again. So this site will be really cramped if it can happen at all. And certainly when we looked at it, we believe it can't. If you look at this building as an 84,000 square foot building, try and look at the parking lot that's there and add another 100,000 square feet of facility. Recognize that you can't build right up to the property line. You have to have some certain setbacks, and you have to have an access road all the way around the building. So it shrinks that parking lot, and so certainly the architect, myself, the facilities committee looked at that and said, not a viable option. But clearly, as you just heard, there are people for whom they're not convinced. And so we need to do more due diligence to help convince them or show that, wow, we made a mistake. So that's why this is here. But I think it's really going to be hard-pressed to create a building on this site that satisfies the foreseeable program and meet the state standards.
Thank you.
Bob Day, Shannon Drive. All right, so this issue with our high school, senior high school, is not a new issue. We've been struggling with this for many years. Geez, I can't even count. I can tell you it's been at least 6 years, I'll tell you that. And we've been through studies in the past. We've spent our money for studies, and we've had the building evaluated. So we've had the building evaluated, and the study that I last saw said, okay, here's your building, and here's where you are deficient in all these areas. And the report was, 3-4 inches thick. And it told us that our classrooms were undersized, our hallways are this, our exits, our stairways, blah, blah. All of the information was right there. And if I heard you earlier, we're pretty much staying with the same architect engineer that we've been using for all these years. Are they using this previous study and then spending a little more extra time with it to come up with a number to support this warrant article? Or are we starting from scratch?
Well, obviously they've got familiarity with the building, but they would come back in and analyze this building because compared to, they've done this work before, but it was several years ago. So now we've got older systems and maybe more issues, but they would come in and give a fresh look at it so they can put a fresh price on it.
Well, okay, so more people have done an evaluation of this than myself standing here, but it just seems to me that we have had a report done years ago that outlines all the deficient areas. It would just be a matter to fine-tune it to today's standards to come up with a dollar amount. Whether that would cost the $40,000, I'm not quite sure. But I would sure hope that the work that we've done in years past is not water under the bridge and it's still part of the building block of how we're going forward. So just with that, then, I just want to say one word about warrant article number 1 on the property. The warrant article number 1, and this is not directed forward, it's kind of reversed to behind me. Warrant article 1 is not going to be an impact to the taxpayer's dollar as it currently exists. And as far as property purchases go, the property doesn't really dissolve itself, so it's always there. So if we decide not to go forward with a high school rebuild, and we do a renovation as you're investigating, that property is still within our back pocket to be resold, returned to the taxpayers, or what have you in any way, shape, or form. It's not a lost proposition in my mind. So just something to think about, folks. Thanks.
Sure. So you just got preempted here.
I just wanted to say, Bob.
Don't put your hand in front of the lights.
The only difference, I understand it to be from the last time this study was done, is that the Carpenter property wasn't a viable option at that point. And I think that's what I'm hearing townspeople are saying, how can you not renovate the current building with that land being parking, fields, whatever. So that's the only difference. I don't know if the architectural firm will take that into account. I'm hoping that they will, but that's the only thing I could see that's different.
Sure. Mr. Chase would like to speak too.
Sorry, Lou.
Bill, if you could wait a second. William.
We don't own that.
So, sorry to cut in, and I've lost my train of thought now. It is, and I've been on the school board for a very long time, so I can remember some of the details of that study, but they do fade. My recollection is of that study of deficiency that was done back however many years ago it was. It was largely based on deficiencies with respect to the educational specifications, classroom area, egress, ADA sort of thing. I think a lot of what this is going to get into is in the mechanicals, the plumbing, the electric, the HVAC, which was, in my recollection, beyond the scope of that study. That said, you're absolutely right. We have, schematics of floor plans and that sort of thing. So that's all very recyclable. And I can tell you, it's been more than a couple of conversations I've had with the superintendent that there's got to be a lot there that we can reuse, and that is the intent. I yield the rest of my time to Mr. Fox.
To me, the study's been done. We get a nice saying at my work, you can diamond and crust a turd, but it's still a turd. That's basically what the study was, okay? My question is you kind of mentioned, Dr. Hayes, that this study will not look into DOE requirements and standards, or will it?
It does not.
It does not. Currently, do you know off the top of your hand how many waivers we get from DOE? As far as our...
I don't. There's a report that shows that we have very few spaces that comply with the current construction standards. Again, getting back to old information, when I not too long ago talked with the architect and he brought in some drawings, and there appeared to us to be a drawing, from his recollection, it was the attempt to take the current footprint and redesign the building to spaces that met state standards, and then see what was left over. And his recollection was that they had so many more spaces they would have to build as new construction that they simply stopped. They didn't go further to design an addition because it didn't appear viable at all.
Off the top of my head, I think the last study was done in 2007. Is that correct? 2006, 2007?
I think this
roughly?
drawing was a 2006 drawing that I saw.
Barring any kind of student decrease hugely in population, the building hasn't changed much, people. We're spending $40,000 on something that has already really been done 5 years ago. The building hasn't been, like I said, you can paint it all you want, but it's still the same building. Without it meeting state standards as far as education, is there ever a end line or an ending to those waivers? I know at the junior high level, from the facilities committee report, 10 out of 10 classrooms are too small by either 100 square feet or more. So we might get waivers for those. I don't know all the ins and outs, but is there ever a foreseeable ending of those waivers? Do they ever come and say, you know what, you don't meet state educational standards, you're done, we're shutting you down, other than the state fire marshal meeting fire standards? Obviously that's just as important, but educational standards are as important as fire standards. And I'm just wondering, logistically, for the public and the town to realize that this building is so deficient that we're 100,000 square feet in deficiencies, when does this state step in and just say, you know what, you're just not meeting educational requirements, you have to do something different? And I'm just wondering, is there ever an ending to those waivers?
I don't know if there's a point at which the state does step in. Clearly they have guidelines that relate to renovation of a building, that if you're renovating to a certain level, and I believe it's 60% of what new building would cost, then they're going to push you in the direction, both through financing and state standards, of saying that's not a sufficient project. They still have to approve whatever your design is, and any waivers would have to be supported by the school board in their request to say that yes, it doesn't meet the standard, but we believe it still meets quality education for students, and the commissioner of education or designee would have to agree with that. So there is pressure brought to bear through the renovation process. Simply existing as we are, I haven't seen that. The only piece that I've heard of that comes close to that is in Somersworth. You may have heard, they closed the upper floor on an elementary school building. And that was a joint decision, from my understanding, between the state fire marshal and the school building aid administrator, who also does school approval. So they jointly toured the building, said this is insufficient, variety of reasons, and they shut down their top floor. And Somersworth then put portables. They had room on site. They put portables on site to educate kids and built a new school. That's the only time I've ever seen them step in.
And finally, with that report being done in 2006 or 2007, is there a way, and I don't know if it's possible, that you probably had a firm do that report of this building? It wasn't just a facilities committee going through and making a little etch-a-sketch drawing. Is there a way of actually having that firm's report put on the facilities page other than what the facility committee says?
It is the same architect, so all of those resources are available to us. And
I would just like to see maybe a comparison, or people might want to see a comparison of what the 2007, 2006 report is to what now is. Probably going to be the same or the worse, probably worse. But have them both, have that first one up on the web so we can actually take a look at it and then have a comparison when this survey is
The
done?
analysis of the facility was truly done in 2004, and that is on the web.
Okay.
What was done later on was simply redesign of the facilities, more schematic kind of things. But I don't believe they did another assessment of the mechanical, electrical, and so forth.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Walter Prescott, 2 Maston Drive. This is probably the report you were looking for. 2005, July 14th. Got the electrical, the mechanical, got it all in here. If you want to look at it, I'd be glad to lecture. The whole issue that's going on, whether it's Article 5 or Article 1, they all go in the same direction. So my question is, what happens if we don't do anything? We don't renovate, and if we don't build a new school.
Well, let's take them in pieces. Let me see if I can get them all. First of all, if you don't buy the land, you miss an opportunity to buy the large piece over there.
I don't even want to talk about.
No, I understand.
I want to talk
But I
about
just wanna
final
make-
results.
Mr. Prescott, let him answer the question.
You may not, but I want others to know that Mr. Carpenter, where he wasn't there 2 years ago, is now ready to sell. And if it's not to us, it would be somebody else, and so there's a missed opportunity. If we don't move forward to construct a new school, or even think about renovating this, then we have to do the fire and life safety. Because the deadline of September 2015 will come quicker than you can imagine. And if we're not done by then, what I expect will happen is that the local fire department is going to pull in the state fire marshal and said, I've done everything I can to get this community to bring it up to code, and we're still not there. And and circumstances like that in the past are in Somersworth and Unity have resulted in schools being closed or partially closed. So that's that scenario. If you do nothing else, you've got to do fire and life safety.
Okay, I agree. You do have to do the safety issues.
I'm sorry, I can't.
I said I do agree with you. You do have to do the safety issues.
Right.
Now, the fire marshal's office inspected the school on March 31st in 2004. Have they been here since then?
The fire department.
No, I said fire marshal. I don't care about the fire department.
Fire marshal has not been here, but the fire department does an annual inspection of the building, has a checklist that it has to do in terms of code compliance, and then reports that to the fire marshal.
So all the time last year when you were telling us that these things had to be done because the fire marshal was going to close this school down were not true.
No, I
because
told
the
you
fire
the
marshal was never here.
Our conversations, believe me, I was truthful with you. Our conversations are with the local fire chief and some of his subordinates, okay, who are involved in this inspection process. They then report to and last year met with the fire marshal. So they're our conduit, if you will, to having that communication. He is well aware of issues that are here in this building. And so that's who I work with, and it's his emissary, if you will. It's up to the local fire department to
enforce the fire code.
To maintain the expectations you meet code compliance. And if they don't, then if we can't do that, then the fire marshal will step in.
But the fire marshal never said that they were going to close this school down if we didn't do certain things. Because they did not even inspect the school.
I never said that they did.
Let's move on to another issue,
right?
Because we could be here all night.
Yeah.
You have also stated that we need a new school because of this gradual growth. I'm going to use the year 1992, and the reason I'm going to use that year is because that's the first year that the 6th grade was in this building. first year after they had moved to the new school and they moved back in. The enrollment then, because preschool was also in here, was 517 students. This is 1992. As of last year, the year 2010 and 11, the enrollment for this school was 491. It was down from what it was in 1992. It's gone up, it's gone back down. There's no gradual growth, it's a up and down scale. In 1996, it was 562. That was just prior to the last renovations. There again, the numbers I'm using came out of last year's school district report. I didn't dream them up. Not the 92 stuff, they came out of previous reports. 1996, 562. 2020, 21. This is your enrollment projection. 576. Not much growth. So why do we need a new school? Anybody?
You know, Mr. Prescott, it's 10 o'clock, and to be honest, that question has been addressed through hundreds of hours of discussion and presentation.
I've never heard it. I've never heard it. I got one more issue, and
well, hold on, wait.
I'll make
you'll have an opportunity to hear a response from the school board, but there was a hearing, very well publicized, in this building last week. They had signs up all over town on the billboards and on the websites.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay, so it's been more than discussed. So this question is so big to suggest it can be answered.
Okay, I just got one more thing to state. In the town report a couple years back, Cliff stressed the need to do something at the elementary school. This school, there should be things done in it. There's nobody denying that. The elementary school, the backyard is full of portable units. Why don't we take this $1 million we got and go up there and put the additions on that we know are needed? There's no guesswork about it. There's no projections. They're needed, and they're needed right now. And one last thing, if you take a tour of this facility and you're going to say how bad it looks, look at the principal's office, look at the guidance counselor's office. Those are all parts of the old original building, and they look pretty damn good. And with a little maintenance, the rest of the school could look that good.
We're dwindling in numbers as the night goes on, but if anyone else would like to speak about Article 5, which is about $40,000 from existing funds to do a study of the architectural and engineering fees associated with the renovation and addition of the current junior senior high school, this is your opportunity. All right, seeing none, then I think we have completed all articles for the school. Just so everybody knows, the Budget Committee is meeting Thursday the 26th to finalize their recommendations. And the deliberative sessions are February 7th and February 8th at 7 p.m. And they will be here in the school gymnasium because we're expecting a lot of people. The town and school will be separate evenings, so they're not 6 hours long. With that, thank you all, and a motion to, I think, all those in favor?
Thank you for the